After violent protests in Nepal, the government was ultimately forced to give in. Following the Home Minister, now the Prime Minister has also resigned. Nepal's Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli had been in power for just 1 year, but amid growing public discontent, he had to step down before completing his term. In this video, we will discuss this entire crisis. It all began when the Nepali government decided to ban 26 social media platforms. Platforms like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, WhatsApp, Twitter, and Reddit were abruptly banned. The reason given by the government was that these platforms were not complying with the country's laws. Which laws? A few days earlier, the Nepali government had issued a directive requiring all social media platforms operating in the country to register with the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology. The government argued that this was necessary to prevent misinformation, hate speech, and threats to national security. To enforce this, a bill was introduced called the Operation, Use and Regulation of Social Media in Nepal. From the name itself, it is clear that the government intended to regulate social media in the country on its own terms.
The bill included provisions that required social media platforms to establish a legal presence in the country, appoint local representatives, and adhere to the government's guidelines. In short, the Nepali government wanted to manage the online services of these platforms and moderate content on social media according to its own terms. Even though this regulatory bill had not yet been passed in Parliament, platforms like TikTok and Viber complied with the rules and registered with the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology. As a result, they were spared from the ban and continued to operate in Nepal. But those social media platforms that ignored these rules were banned from the country. The ban immediately sparked an outcry, with people accusing the government of censorship and curbing freedom of expression. The government dismissed these concerns, defending the ban as necessary for national sovereignty. Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli stated that even if some people working with social media platforms lost their jobs because of the government's actions, it was still not more important than the nation's dignity, independence, and sovereignty. At that time, he did not know that within just a few days, he is going to lose his job as well.
Anyway, you already know how widely social media platforms are used today. People connect with each other through social media, and it has also become an important tool for business and activism. Especially the youth spend a significant amount of time on social media. That's why, the moment major social media platforms were banned, protests erupted across Nepal. A large number of young people took to the streets to protest against the government's decision. The government's abrupt ban on social media platforms was seen as an attempt to silence the voice of the youth. This youth-led uprising came to be known as the Gen Z protests. Gen Z or Generation Z refers to people born between the late 1990s and the early 2010s. They are the first generation to grow up entirely in the digital age. In other words, they have been familiar with smartphones, social media, and the internet since the very beginning of their lives. For many of them, social media plays a vital role in daily life, and for some, it is even a source of livelihood. Now, if you suddenly try to take away something that is so deeply ingrained in their lives, what do you think will happen? Naturally, massive resistance will follow. And that is exactly what happened in Nepal.
Youth began protesting over digital freedom. This is how it all started. It began with opposition to the social media ban, but gradually more issues were added to the movement, such as corruption, the economic crisis, and nepotism. The scope of the protests kept widening. Large rallies were organized, and people started raising deeper issues. In Nepal's capital Kathmandu, the country's parliament building was set on fire. Even the Supreme Court was torched. Flags were hoisted. Slogans were shouted. Demands to end corruption were raised, and the lavish lifestyles and privileges of politicians' families were called out. The finance minister of Nepal was even chased and beaten by people, and the video of it went viral. Finance Minister Vishnu Prasad Paudel was seen desperately running on the street while a mob chasing him. Such insane scenes were witnessed from Nepal. As the protests suddenly turned violent, the government cracked down. This led to the loss of lives and injuries to several people. After this, KP Oli's government began to be compared to Hitler's regime, and calls for the Prime Minister's resignation grew louder. The protests were already being widely covered in international media, and pressure on the Nepali government kept mounting. Eventually, an emergency cabinet meeting had to be called. Orders were given to investigate the violence. Compensation was announced for those who lost their lives. Free medical treatment was promised for the injured. And in the wake of the violent crackdown and mishandling of the protests, Home Minister Ramesh Lekhak was forced to resign.
After such intense violent protests, the Nepali government had to restore social media in order to de-escalate the situation and bring back normalcy. And ultimately, Nepal's Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli was also forced to resign. Nepal is struggling with high inflation, corruption and unemployment. The country has been facing political instability for a long time and people are tired of this political turmoil. This is why voices are now being raised in favor of restoring the monarchy. Many believe that when Nepal transitioned from monarchy to democracy, the promises made at that time were never fulfilled. Democracy, they argue, has not improved their lives. For this reason, people want the monarchy to return. Since democracy was established in 2008, governments in Nepal have changed frequently. Before any government could focus on solving people's problems, it was replaced. As a result, progress in Nepal has been very slow. To this day, the problems of the people remain unresolved. High inflation, unemployment, inequality, corruption, and ethnic tensions persist. Successive governments have failed to address these core issues, leaving people deeply frustrated. Now, citizens are demanding accountable governance. Nepal has entered a phase of severe political uncertainty. Who will take charge of power in the country? Will the Hindu monarchy make a comeback? All of this will only become clear in the coming days.
Now let us talk about what impact this could have on India. If we look closely at the last few years, we can observe a pattern emerging in India's neighborhood. In 2022, it was Sri Lanka. In 2024, Bangladesh. And now in 2025, Nepal. The same pattern was visible everywhere. Growing public dissatisfaction over economic crisis, corruption, misuse of power, and poor governance. Then large numbers of youth took to the streets and brought down their governments. Demonstrations began over some issue, but suddenly escalated, turned violent, and ultimately led to regime change in the country. In all three cases, the way people were effectively mobilized, the way government buildings and the homes of elites were targeted, and the way regime change occurred, there are striking similarities. It appears almost as if everything is happening under a common model of mass movements, as if there is some external hand involved, as if protesters were provided with a toolkit, as if these protests were manufactured. This is entirely possible, and it should come as no surprise if external powers attempt to apply a similar model in India as well. For now, India enjoys political stability and its economic fundamentals are also strong. But dynamics can shift very quickly, especially when many countries are not happy with India's current regime. So attempts to sow the seeds of unrest in India could be made at any time.
Nepal shares its border with 5 Indian states. There is an open border between India and Nepal. So, instability in Nepal, being a neighboring country, will also create challenges for India. The Nepali crisis is bound to have a spillover effect on India. In the border areas, there could be a rise in illegal migration, smuggling, and crimes. Many Nepali citizens have familiar ties in India, so they may come over. This will put additional strain on India's limited resources. After Pakistan, China, and Bangladesh, India will now have to strengthen security along the Nepal border as well. Maintaining a high level of vigilance will be essential. Further, India is Nepal's largest trading partner. Chaos in Nepal could disrupt trade, negatively impacting Indian exporters. Instability is never good for trade and business. And since protesters are targeting public infrastructure, if the situation goes out of control, projects funded by India could also be at risk. Due to the atmosphere of uncertainty in Nepal, the projects India has invested in may face delays, which could increase costs and lead to financial losses for India. So, it wouldn't be wrong to say that India's connectivity and infrastructure goals in the region will suffer as a result of this crisis in Nepal.
For instance, through cross-border projects, India aims to import 10 gigawatts of hydropower from Nepal in the coming decade. For this, the timely completion of projects is essential, which in turn requires political stability in Nepal. This will only be possible if the current crisis does not drag on. With the fall of the pro-China Oli government, a political vacuum has emerged, and Nepal could now become a ground for a proxy game between China and the United States. Both countries will seek to expand their influence in Nepal. China will try to deepen its ties with the new government through infrastructure loans and investments, so that projects under its Belt and Road Initiative, such as the Trans-Himalayan Railway, can be completed as quickly as possible. China's ultimate aim is to counter India's influence in Nepal and strengthen its strategy of encircling India by improving ties with its neighboring countries. On the other hand, the United States will seek to install a pro-Western government in Nepal to secure its strategic interests. Thus, Nepal is preparing to become a new ground for a proxy war between America and China. After Pakistan, Myanmar, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, instability has now reached Nepal as well, creating multi-front security challenges for India. To deal with these, India will be forced to divert its resources.
Prime Minister Oli was scheduled to visit India within just a few days. During his visit, important discussions were planned between India and Nepal on trade, tourism, connectivity, hydropower and border issues. But suddenly, just before the visit, Oli began making anti-India statements. He started raising absurd claims over Lipu Lake, Kalapani and Limpiadhura, which led to diplomatic tensions between India and Nepal. Before the situation could improve, protests broke out in Nepal and the government collapsed. Notice the timing here. Just when efforts were being made to improve India-Nepal ties, the Oli government suddenly fell. As a result, India-Nepal engagement has been disrupted for the time being. Because of the political instability, the resolution of border disputes between the two countries will now be delayed. Clearly, this cannot be just a coincidence. For the wise, even a hint is enough. Anyway, to safeguard its interests, India must immediately engage with the new leadership. Through soft power and diplomacy, it must counter China's influence in Nepal. And most importantly, India must ensure that any attempts by external powers to illegally engineer regime change within India itself are foiled.